All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the first Cavalier and Transition webinar. We want to welcome you all, and we hope you enjoy this first in our series. This presentation is called Job Search Tools, How to Brush Up. I'm going to introduce myself really quickly for you. My name is Melissa Burgess, and I am the Assistant Director of the Center for Career and Professional Development. Some of you might know our office as the Co-op office. We had a name change early last year, so the name might be new to you. I would like you guys to note the chat box that we have down at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type in the question, and we've saved some time at the end of the presentation to get any and all of your questions answered. So please feel free to type in as we go. All right, with that said, let's get started. Let's jump into what we're going to be covering today. Let me just see. All right, so we have 3 different categories that I would like to cover with you today. We're going to talk about the materials that you want to use as far as job search tools go. We're going to talk about the content that you really want to focus on. And we're going to talk a little bit about format. The way that we've organized today's presentation is a little bit more untraditional as far as resumes and cover letters are concerned. We're not going to talk about how you build a resume and a cover letter, but we're really going to focus on some of the content, the interesting stuff that really grabs employers' attentions as you are submitting your application materials, through job search portals. All right, so let's dive into materials. We're going to talk about a little bit about what we're not going to talk about today, just in case there's any questions. However, I am happy to answer any questions about any of these topics, but this is not going to be the basis of the presentation today. We're not really going to touch on basics at all, as far as categories and things like that that you want to put on your resume. We're not really going to talk about specifics. We're going to go through a couple of examples, but we're not really going to get into the nitty-gritty about what not to and what to include in your resume. And finally, we're also not going to talk about content organization. What we are going to talk about is if you already have a resume and already have a cover letter, how can you really make it the strongest resume and cover letter as you submit to employers? We really want to talk about the content and the words and the language that you're using in your documents that can really get you in front of an employer. All right, so let's jump into content. The content we're going to talk about is going to focus on 2 different things. We're going to focus on bullet points, and we're also going to focus on cover letter. There is a lot of overlap between what you can include in your bullet points and what you can include in your cover letter. The language you're going to be using is very similar because you want to engage the employers. You want to showcase what you are going to be, why you're a good candidate for the job. All right, so we're going to start with the rule of 3. These apply to generally bullet points, definitely, and you can also use some of these questions to include in your cover letter. So you're going to ask yourself, how did I do it? When you're thinking about an experience, how did you do whatever it is that you did? If you are reviewing resumes, how did you do it? If you're teaching in a classroom, how did you teach? Did you incorporate smartboards? Did you incorporate iPads? Things like that. You also want to focus on how often did you do it? Were you doing these things on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? Were you doing it every day? The frequency of which you do something is important for an employer to know. You also want to focus on how many or how much. So how many kids were you working with? How many employees were you supervising? How much money were you working with? All of these things will help give you that Goldilocks amount of information that will let the employer see you. They will envision what you're doing in your current position or in your past positions, so that way they can kind of start imagining what you bring to the table for them. All right, so that's the first part to your bullet points and to your cover letter, answering those 3 questions. The second part is you want to really bring in as many action verbs as you can. So what are action verbs? Let's take a look at this bullet point. We could say you're responsible for managing student workers, keeping records, and working with other offices on campus. But if I was an employer and I'm reading this bullet point on your resume or seeing this sentence in your cover letter, it's not really giving me a lot of information as far as what you did, and it's not answering any of those 3 questions. So let's break this down and see how we can create a stronger bullet point out of what we have here. All right, let's look at manage is a really great action verb to start with, and we have managing student workers right in this sentence already, but the managing gets a little bit lost after responsible for. Responsible for is a really vague way to start off your bullet point. So you want to start off with that action verb, the word that will engage the employer. So then we're talking about managing approximately 3 student workers daily. So we're getting some of those 3 questions into this bullet point. You'll notice the use of the word approximately, and I point that out because you don't need to be exact. When you're talking about how many kids or how much money you're working with, you can use words like about and approximately just to give an employer, a basic idea of what you've done, what you're used to working with, the volume that you've worked with in the past. So let's move on, and we're going to talk about the keeping records part of this bullet point. You can use maintain as an action verb. You're maintaining something, in this case, an average of 80 student internship records yearly. So again, we're going back to those 3 questions. How many and how often are definitely incorporated here. And we're being a little bit more specific about what type of records we're keeping. This is important because you're communicating indirectly to employers about confidentiality. Perhaps student internship placements are not public knowledge, and so that's communicating that this person can work with confidential information and be trusted to do that. So if you're applying for, a financial position and you're going to be working with money, this might be an important bullet point to include. All right, and finally we have collaborate. We're talking about working with others on campus, but that's a little vague. We want to get more specific and talk about who are we collaborating with and what are we doing to collaborate. So in this instance, we could say we're collaborating with various offices on campus to provide hot topic workshops, including social media, LinkedIn, and internship skills. This bullet point is really getting into some specifics as far as what this person, what their skill set is. They're indirectly communicating about their ability to do public speaking by providing the workshop titles. They're talking about their teamwork with various offices on campus to provide these workshops. And so there's a lot of information you're communicating indirectly between any of these bullet points. So you can see how we took this top bullet point, the bullet point in black, and broke it out into 3 very much stronger bullet points that communicate a little bit more specifically to an employer about what you've done. We don't have a particular job title here, but let's say it's somebody in an educational setting, and this is communicating the skill sets that they've gained from working in this educational facility. So this is what you want to try to work with your bullet points. You want to try to incorporate numbers when you can, quantify information as much as possible, use the action verbs, and try to provide a little bit of examples. You don't need an exhaustive laundry list of all the workshops you've run, but just give me an idea, wet my feet into what you have included or what you have participated in the past. So as an employer, I can ask you, Linda, please tell me more about the social media workshop, that we've been looking into, doing something similar. Can you tell me what you did and how you did it? And that's automatically opening up the door for you to really showcase your skill set just by having that bullet point on your resume. All right, so that's a little bit on action verbs. Now we're going to move into active language. The action verbs are important to have definitely on your resume, and you want to try to incorporate them into your cover letter. This active language is going to be very important for your cover letter, and I have a cover letter example in a couple of slides. First, we're going to talk about why active language. You want to use active language to engage an employer. You want them, they're going to be looking at, for every position that an employer has open, they're going to have at least 100 resumes and applications come in for that one position. And so you want your materials to engage that employer so they're drawn to you, so they can be interested in reading more of your materials so that you can make them want to meet you so you can get that interview. You want to highlight your skill sets. You want to show, what you've done and how you've done it and why you're a good fit for this position. You want to showcase, again, kind of going along with highlight, you want to showcase what you've done that makes you the best fit for this position. So you're highlighting your skills, but you're showcasing why you're the quality candidate for this particular employer. So this is why we use the active language. Let's jump into an example here. This is a cover letter I pulled offline. This is the entire cover letter, so it's a little short, but we're really going to focus in on this second paragraph. The second paragraph of your cover letter is actually where the bulk of your information needs to be. The first and the third paragraphs have their purposes, but the second paragraph is really your time to shine. So if you're not using it to your advantage, then you're really using it to your disadvantage. So this second paragraph is 2 sentences long. My interest in your fast-growing consulting firm comes from the creatively planned events your firm is known for. Okay, so my question as an employer would be, well, what is your interest? Why are you interested in my firm? I'm not seeing a lot of examples here. And the person goes on to say, my energy is boundless, and I am at my best when I am in the thick of things. But again, there's no support for that. Anybody could say, I'm at my best when I'm in the thick of things, but as an employer, if I'm reading this, I need to really see you in the thick of things to really believe that that's true. So let's take this 2-sentence paragraph and make it a little bit better. Let's make it stronger with some active language and some supporting examples. All right, so we have the first sentence that the person included. I have left in red the original words, and in blue I have added in some of that active language and some of the examples. So in your cover letter, you want to have transitional phrases like in particular and for example. These things will kind of naturally lead you into telling a little bit of a story about your experience that showcases your skill set. And those things together, collectively are the active language that you need to be using in your cover letter. So, for example, in the first sentence in blue, in particular, I really enjoy how KMJ events come together in a collaborative environment, allowing every team to provide a unique touch to each project. My experience in planning events stems from my background in higher education. So we're linking back to what exactly about KMJ events this person finds interesting, because they reference their interest in this fast-growing consulting firm. And we're also talking about how their personal experience relates to event planning. So if you're trying to change careers, if you're trying to move from teaching into maybe training, you need to make this link. You need to make it very clear for the employer how your experience connects to this position. And use active language to showcase that. All right, moving on to the second sentence, this person is saying, I have found that my energy is boundless and I am at my best when I am in the thick of things. But like I said earlier, that's so vague. So let's jump into an example. For example, when developing a new program for our incoming class of freshmen, I jumped at the chance to collaborate with multiple offices across campus. So you're seeing some of these action verbs that we talked about with the resume bullet points show up again in the cover letter. So using these engaging language is really important so that the employer can really start to see you in your position, can see you in your story. I volunteered myself to be the point person for my department and worked tirelessly to ensure all details were accounted for when the event unrolled last March. So you're getting a little bit more specific into the details of your story. You're letting the employer kind of have a sense of the timeline you were working with. And then this last sentence is linking this position back, linking this experience back to the position the person is applying for. I believe that with my ambitious and positive attitude, coupled with my affinity for new technology, I will be able to contribute the same passion and energy to KMJ events. So if you're not using this language in your cover letter, you really want to start to try to pull in some of this action verb language, this active language, so that the employer can really start to see you in that position. They can see you not only in your past position or your current position, but they can really see you applying yourself in their position. That's the important part, is you need to connect the dots for the employer so they want you with them. They want to invite you in for an interview because they can see you fulfilling your job duties with them. All right, so that's the content that we're talking about today. Let's jump into how you want to format your resume and your cover letter. What should you be thinking about? What we want to avoid as far as formatting goes are templates. Templates are kind of the devil as far as resume and cover letters go. Templates are really hard to edit. They're really challenging as far as when you want to add in new information, and it's actually very hard to make a template your own. For resumes and cover letters, you really want your information to be strictly about you. You don't want to be trying to fill your experience into what somebody else thought would look good. And so that's why we recommend avoiding templates. If you have a template already, it's absolutely fine to model your resume after a template, but you really don't want to make that your go-to resume format. All right, we also want to avoid extravagance. We don't want to talk too much about very, very, very specific things. Like I said, you want to touch on the workshops you might have given or the public speaking events you might have had in the past, but you don't need to go into too much detail. Extravagance also applies to the type of font you're using on your resume and your cover letter. You don't need it to be too curly cued or too highlighted with bold, italics, and underline. Maybe pick a nice balance that really highlights the information you think is key to your experience. Maybe you think your job titles have been something unique to you, and so you want to highlight that, so you bold those. You don't need to bold italics it. Just pick one or the other and use that to balance out your resume. The other thing you want to avoid is inconsistency. So if you're using periods on some of your bullet points, but you're not using periods on your other bullet points, pick and choose. You can't pick and choose. You need to choose one or the other. Neither is incorrect, but you just need to be consistent across the board. You also need to be consistent as far as how you're formatting your dates. If you're using the numbers for the month and the year, that's fine, but do that all the way through. If you're using, the shortened version of the months, that's absolutely fine. And the year, just be consistent all the way through. And this includes all your sections, from your education section to your experience section to your community involvement section. Everything needs to be consistent. If you've organized your information in a particular pattern, do that through all of your sections. A lot of people will have their education section organized one way, but then their experience section is organized an entirely different way. So sit back and evaluate your resume and ask yourself, do I have a pattern? Do I have my information organized in a similar way? And the reason why this is important is because if an employer is looking through a stack of 100 resumes for one position, they're going to want to be able to find your information very quickly. They're going to want to look through all your job titles. So if you establish a pattern early on and put all your information in an organized fashion, they're going to be able to see everything that they're looking for. Some employers really want to know the dates of your employment. Other employers would really care to know where you were employed, and so you want to make it easy for them to find that information so they can quickly evaluate if they want to bring you in for an interview. All right, so enough of what to avoid. Let's look at what we want to do. What we want to strive for on our materials is a 10 to 12 point font. You don't want to go smaller than 10, and you really don't want to go larger than 12. There is the rule about one-page resumes, and that is preferred. However, that comes with a caveat that if you have really great experience, you can have a 2-page resume. And if you have a lot of experience, perhaps you might want to kind of whittle down your resume so that it is 1 page if your experience is kind of all over the map. You want to make it very clear for the employer why you're applying for this particular position. I've worked with a few alums in the past, who have moms who might have taken off time between when they graduated from Cabrini and now they're trying to get back into the workforce, and they had this set of experience closer to graduation, maybe in film and journalism, but now they want to go into teaching, and they have teaching aid experience and they have substitution experience, and so you really want to focus on that teaching experience rather than the film and journalism experience. So for this, this instance that I'm making up for you, you might want to whittle down to 1 page and really focus on that teaching experience. And that's where the 10 to 12 point font comes in, as far as you want to increase the amount of space that your teaching experience is taking up. Make it a 12 point font. If you really have a lot of relevant experience that you want to include, maybe you go down to 10 and you can fit in, a little bit more information for that employer. You also want your resume and your cover letter to be very easy to read. Like I said, you don't want to be using the curly Q fonts or anything that's too complicated that you can't really quite tell is that an A or an O. You want to make sure that an employer can read through very quickly. Employers will spend maybe 10 to 30 seconds reading through your resume and your cover letter, and so you really want to make sure that they can skim through very quickly, find the points of information that they're looking for. You also want clear highlights. This goes back to the extravagance point that I mentioned on our previous slide, is that you want to make sure that you're bolding important things and that you're not bolding just to bold, right? You don't want to be bolding every old piece of information, because then it loses its value for the employer. So pick maybe your job title and your employer to highlight, either with bold or italics, and maybe you underline your sections. You can look online and find some styles that speak to you and see if there's particular resume formats that really seem to resonate with your experience, or if you like the way that that illustrates somebody's background, you can certainly model your resume after that. And I think all of us have our own preferences as far as what's good highlighting and what's bad highlighting. So I would recommend showing it to a friend or two, maybe your spouse, maybe your child, maybe a friend that you have, a coworker, just to get their feel for how you're highlighting your information on your resume, so you can start to see what do other people think of your preference. You know, if you like the bold, does somebody else like the italics? And listen to the arguments and see what makes the most sense to you as you go forward in creating your resume and cover letters or updating. And when in doubt, I've been getting this question a lot lately, send as a PDF. This is important because these days there's a lot of people who are using the Windows operating system as their main computer, but then there's a handful of people who are also using Apple systems who can't always open a docx file. So if you send your resume in a particular format that an employer can't open, they're not going to contact you and ask you to, Sherry, could you please send me a PDF file because I couldn't open it. You're 1 in 100, and so they're going to say, well, hopefully the other 99 resumes and cover letters I'll be able to open. PDF formats, however, can be opened across the board on almost any operating system, so it's a very safe bet to send as a PDF. And that's a very easy formatting in your computer system to take care of. And so if you'd like to learn how to do that, if you don't already know, I'm happy to set up a phone call and give you a little lesson as saving it as a PDF. All right, so that's pretty much the material that we wanted to cover today for you as far as your basic job application materials, the basic content that you want to be focusing on. How can you rearrange your bullet points in your cover letter paragraphs to really highlight your strengths? And then we covered a little bit of format. With that, does anybody have any questions? Okay. If you guys can't see the question box that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation, there's a little red arrow at the top of your screen that you should be able to open up the window, the chat window. I'll wait a couple minutes to see if any questions come through, and while we're waiting, if everybody wouldn't mind just typing in what year they graduated from Cabrini, I would love to know who we're talking with today. Great, 2004, awesome. $1980. Wow, we have a good spread here. 2016. Oh my, wow, a current student. Our lovely alumni coordinator will be sending the recorded version of this presentation to everybody who has registered. Sorry if I missed it. Did you graduate from Cabrini, Rachel?
No, Rachel is Rachel's the director of alumni engagement development, and she's not.
Okay, Rachel is our director of alumni development, and she is not an alum of Cabrini. My name is Melissa. I am the assistant director of the Center for Career and Professional Development. Unfortunately, also not an alum, but our alumni coordinator, Nick here, who is with me, is a Cabrini alum from 2012. No problem. It is Rachel's account. Thanks, Kristen. Any questions about the material that we have today? I'm going to give you guys my contact information on this next slide. Yeah. There we go. Melissa Burgess, I'm the Assistant Director, like I said. Feel free to email me or give me a call with any particular questions individual to your resume, or if you have questions about what we covered in today's presentation. Happy to help with anything. We work with a lot of alums over email and over the phone, because I know that some of you have moved away from the Cabrini area. And we also try to be flexible as far as when we can meet with alums. Our office stays open until 7 p.m. If you have any questions, on Mondays, I should say, 7 p.m. on Mondays, if you'd like to meet, but you can't meet during work hours. So we do that for you guys as a special service because we really like to care for our alumni. All right, so with that, it doesn't look like we have any questions. Please feel free to reach out, like I said, and we hope you enjoyed. Have a good afternoon, everybody.